All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Don Bork. I am the Senior Technical Marketing Engineer for the OnCommand Insight Product Management Group. And today we're joined by two of my esteemed colleagues, Mr. Mike Somfrisky, Consulting System Engineer for OnCommand Insight, and Mr. Ketsiaf, System Engineer and Reporting Architect for some of the reports we'll see today. So, Mike, as we discussed previously, you need to be able to provide better, I would say, more detailed business context and rationalization around health, efficiency, risk, and financial impact to our infrastructure is very important. And how too many of us merely focus on individual metrics that we don't necessarily equate or tie to the overall business objectives. And I believe you today are prepared to show us some ways or educate us on some things that we can do just that, and why this is important to our overall data center planning and ultimately our C-level executives. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike, and if you want to do a little introduction about your background and get us started.
Thanks, Don. My name is Mike Somfrisky, and I am the newest member of the OnCommand Insight CSE team. Prior to being a OnCommand Insight SE, I was at VMware doing private clouds, and before that, I had extensive exposure to configuration management databases. So what I did was I brought the Itil management techniques we're doing with the private cloud, and we applied them to the operational metrics and the reports that Ketsiaf had been creating. And the result is a very nice little way of looking at your data centers and making them more agile, more reliable, and more cost-effective. Three areas really bubbled up to the top as being directly in the wheelhouse of OnCommand Insight: incident, capacity, and financial management. I'll be talking about incident management, and then Ketsiaf will talk to us about capacity and financial management. What Don was alluding to in the beginning is isolated metrics or tools that monitor element managers without the process, and by process we mean incident, capacity, and financial management, and without the policy or service level and the application context, are not very impactful on better managing our data centers. By combining metrics, process, and policy, we start a virtuous feedback loop that allows us to deliver better services more quickly. And we're going to show you how that works. So let's take a look at some selected Itil elements. And for those of you who get this deck, there's some very nice links that explain these processes. So incident management, that's when you get a ticket opened up, either by a machine or by a human, that says an SLA has been breached and that's impacting end users. So the incident management is a way of root causing what's going on and addressing that incident. Capacity management can easily be summed up as make sure our applications have enough capacity along the lines of space as well as IAPS. And then financial management, make sure that we're giving the right infrastructure to the application. Just enough infrastructure means that there's resources available for other activities. So some of the important Itil components. First is service desk. This is where application owners interact with the infrastructure team. This is where they get a page of my application, say the Exchange application, is supported by these virtual machines and by these storage volumes. And one of the favorite things that NetApp IT likes to do is do the link and launch and go directly into OnCommand Insight. Second thing is the service catalog, a set of standard IT services. Could be a database, could be a standalone virtual machine, or it could be a test suite initiated by Jenkins. The key is here is that they're standard, and as time goes on, they're more and more automated. NetApp IT was able to reduce the amount of time it takes to deliver a database to a user by 98%, and that started with the service catalog. Very important to the environment is a configuration management database, and that contains our application context. It also contains a mapping to our infrastructure CIs, and tying everything together is the service level agreement. And then finally, process automation. You'll see as you dig deeper into the OnCommand suite and NetApp in general, everything that we do with the GUI or the command line has an equivalent REST call. So we will work with our own WFA process automation. We'll also work with any standard process automation out there. Now, let's introduce
any automation tools, Mike, that are out there from HP or other vendors primarily, right?
I'm partial to VMware's tool, the vRealize Orchestrator. And then HP has a tool. Microsoft has a tool. And there's literally a plethora of other tools. Some people, specifically in the OpenStack world, they're using Heat, which is a Python script-based framework for automating provisioning, etc.
Excellent.
The OnCommand Insight, there's three things that are important for us here. First is Agentless Collection. It was designed to be agentless such that within minutes, hours, we can go and connect to your element managers that are already in your data center and collect the key metrics. The second thing is a data warehouse filled with operational metrics plus the information we get from the CMDB. And that enables us to do some really powerful enterprise reporting in the format that is useful to people doing incident capacity financial Itil processes. And what I'm going to show you is how that works with the incident management.
And Mike, one of the concepts that I found that was very intriguing or appealing to NetApp IT was that the data is constantly being refreshed, right? That logical and physical mapping that OnCommand Insight captures, that feeds into their framework, and it keeps that database or that CMDB current or always accurate.
Yes, that's actually something that NetApp IT takes for granted, is they have an accurate, up-to-date, automatically populated CMDB. And in our demonstration lab, that's something that we're in process of putting into place. And we'll see the impact of not having an up-to-date CMDB. So great point. So let's take a look at the useful operational metrics. Latency and throughput are two very good metrics for managing incidents related to lack of resources. By managing your incidents, you're able to dramatically reduce the amount of time it takes to resolve the incident, and you tend to reduce the number of incidents. As a matter of fact, NetApp IT is using OnCommand Insight and a IT management process framework, and our P1 incidents shrunk in number by 66%, and they also shrunk in duration. We went from an average of 250 minutes for a P1 incident down to just under an hour after we implemented OnCommand Insight. And that reduction in number and duration, that reduces the percent of time that our IT team spends on unplanned work, which is one of the major KPIs used to measure efficiency. That reduction in unplanned work has a very strong correlation into the ability to deploy projects on time, which usually are key initiatives. Deploy this ERP application by the end of the year because it's very important for the business to be on the new ERP application for the start of the new fiscal year in January. And the key initiatives, the application uptime, the ability to keep applications performing, and on budget feed back into operational metrics, and we'll see some budgetary metrics come into play when Ketsia is talking about capacity and financial management. So let's take a look at the incident management. And I'm not going to do the actual demonstration now, but I'm going to talk about how it's done. So in this demonstration, the service desk, the exchange owner gets a ticket, the exchange application flow. They go into OnCommand Insight and they notice that the latency on the exchange application is high. And then they use the analytics in OnCommand Insight to determine that the exchange application is being bullied by the travel application, and indeed, here we can almost see that the travel application is impacting at the same time. So a ticket is opened up on the travel app. That ability to do the bully victim analysis really shortens the amount of time it takes to resolve a P1 incident. So let's take a look at the user interface of OCI a little bit more closely. We see that this exchange application, its latency is breaching our SLA, and we see that the maximum latency is there. We also see that we have a few more VM metrics, just the important ones. We have some metrics from the hypervisor, and we have some metrics from the storage. We display roughly about half a dozen metrics, the ones that are most important to troubleshooting performance problems, and we leave the rest down below at the bottom of the page, so as not to distract people from their troubleshooting workflow. We see that we have the end-to-end topology of VM to ESX server to SAN to storage array. We have the application context, and then we have a root cause correlation where you just click through the correlated entities until you hit the end of the chain where you have your root cause. That dramatically shortens the mean time to identification. So even when you're being reactive to an incident, you resolve them quicker with OnCommand Insight than without.
This would help stop a lot of the finger pointing that goes on immediately. You can see really quickly using the correlation analytics. Is it utilization? Is it IOPS? Is it latency? And you come out with a root cause almost immediately on the single landing page.
Yes. If you want to see this live and you're a NetApp employee or partner, Lab on Demand has this workflow built into the first scenario in the Lab on Demand. Right, so let's go from reactive to proactive. One of the tenets of Itil is every time that there's an incident or a problem, the cause gets documented. The documentation will include the threshold at which things became a problem. So now we can set our policies based on where they become problems, and we can look at them proactively and see if we have any trends going on. And we can look at things, the VM swap rate, disk latency, the memory utilization on VMs, and one of the favorite ones of NetApp IT is something called a BB credit, where if there is a slow and drain device in your SAN, storage area network, we can identify that rather quickly. And then, of course, you can zero in on specifics if you see a trend growing and want to see what's being impacted. Moving to a more service-oriented, we bring in our CMDB. Our CMDB has what assets are mapped to what application, and they also have the service levels. We have a RESTful API where people take the information in their CMDB and automatically create annotations within OnCommand Insight. The result is we can set thresholds by application. the result of that is we have many fewer alerts firing off, and the ones that are firing off are more important and easier to pay attention to because they contain what application they're firing off on. And then finally, with the incident, I really want to emphasize that a up-to-date, accurate CMDB really enhances the power of OnCommand Insight by tagging and labeling all of our assets with their application context and their SLAs. OnCommand Insight enhances the service desk by having a link and launch pasted to every application, showing you what assets are being utilized by that application. The end result, the application owner and the infrastructure administrator are looking at the same exact information. The result of that, fewer tickets open. The tickets that are opened have a shorter duration. Let me show you an example of this in action. Here we have a virtual machine. Happens to be my workflow automation virtual machine. And we can see that we're alarming on CPU and memory. The owner of the workflow automator noticed that the workflows were not flowing anymore, and they went to the service desk to see what assets were supporting that application. Very quickly, they saw that the latency is within spec. There's no red here. The IOPS went up to a very high rate, but the CPU went up to 100% and stayed pegged. So immediately, the application owner was able to understand that there was a hung process, and they did not open up tickets with the storage team. They did not open up tickets with the networking team. They went directly to the person with control over the operating system to see which process was hung and take corrective action. This being a nice Windows box, corrective action was a reboot and a note of which process was hung. So that was our incident management. And as you can see, OnCommand Insight really contributes a lot to incident management. And the end result, applications are available. More, 5 nines availability is the goal and very achievable. And when there are incidents, they're resolved quicker, and we have a much lower number of them. I'm going to turn this over to Ketsia. Ketsia, do you want to grab control of the screen?
Yep, thank you.
Ketsia, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, too? We didn't get an opportunity for you to introduce.
Sure. So I'm the lead reporting specialist for the pre-sales team on the OnCommand Insight team here. I've been for the product for about 3 years now, and getting closer to, expanding my horizons, getting a little bit more into how do we sell reporting so that it not only just touches the capacity planners, but also getting into the financial teams. And hopefully with this story here, we are able to touch both teams so that they can talk to each other much more frequently, so that we can tie back all the issues that we've seen for incident management, so that we can prevent those as much as possible and be able to provide a better service for our internal customers or their internal customers, right?
Absolutely. So we want to take all of the metrics that we provide, boil them up, tell a story, and give them something that's actionable.
Exactly.
They can actually bring to their upper or C-level management.
Yep, exactly. So while this just says capacity management, this does tie back to the financial management as well. And the first dashboard that we're going to see here, really take a look at the high-level overview of the entire environment. So what we're calling phase 1, the environment usage. As you see here, this is very global, but what we want to focus on is the first 2 rows here. So we can see how much usable capacity we have from a microcode version, so C dot versus 7 mode, and you can see the trending on a monthly basis of how much we're growing that C dot and shrinking that 7 mode. So most customers that we have today are transitioning from 7 mode to C dot, and we can see clearly here on the array count by version that it is starting to grow over time, right? Same thing with the aggregate version as well as the volumes. Now, taking this into account, we do want to take a look at the performance side, not just the capacity, seeing how much workload we can actually allocate to these existing workloads here. Maybe we need to move some stuff off from certain mode right away to see that this would be looking at what are critical to the environment today, right? We want to make sure that we are staying below a certain threshold. So taking a look at the incident management that we saw earlier, what's the best threshold that we can take a look at to make sure that we never cross a incident at all times. So we start to take a look at the node utilization, the capacity utilization, and the disk utilization. Node and disk are looking at anything that's above 50 will show up under these two rows here. And aggregates that are over 30% utilized in terms of capacity are going to be shown here as well from a server mode to CDOT perspective here. So we see that 4 of our aggregates are across the 70% threshold. And that's maybe something we want to take a look at first. However, let's take a look at the utilization trending from a node utilization and disk utilization, right? Aggregate utilization. We can see here that our nodes are consistently high from both a average and peak standpoint. This is an hourly trending for the last 7 days. Seeing what those workloads are doing on a normal daily basis here. And we can see that they are consistently high, right? Our disks hasn't been so much except for a couple spikes. So what we want to take a look at is what's that workload doing to our headroom here. So that's when we start taking a look at our volumes, seeing what the average I/O versus the average latency is, and then we are comparing those two against each other, red being the latency, blue being the IOPS. And then what we're going to take a look at after that is being able to retier or remediate whatever we can. Maybe there's some particular volumes that are skewing these data because they aren't doing the I/O, or ones that are doing some sort of I/O but they're not showing any throughput, or ones that are experiencing some sort of issues, because they're victims of another bully.
The 2 volumes that are experiencing less than 10 IOPS and over 20 milliseconds of latency, would those be victims of something else going on in the environment?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely drill down to see what those volumes are, to try and figure out what is causing that particular volume to be victimized by another one.
One disk utilization spot there, that would be an opportunity. We could probably just make some workloads kick off at different times to kind of remediate that as well, right?
Yep, exactly. So what we're seeing here is that it may be something like, for example, a dedupe schedule that was kicked off and it just went consecutively. We could probably take a look at earlier workloads to see what has been done consistently over the last couple of weeks to see if it's usually during that hourly schedule, right? Maybe they are scheduled once a week during this time frame to see whether or not this is actually happening. Maybe we can just spread it out later on into, let's say, early mornings and late nights so that it is evenly spread out so that they're never crossing that threshold. But what we're mostly concerned about is this last piece here. This is showing us all our volumes across the entire environment, showing them in both a tier's perspective as well as the applications. What we're really concerned about is our most critical applications. But we can see here very quickly that our tier 2 is being fully hammered, but they are mostly tied to NA, which is really our non-critical applications or ones that have been defined with a specific application, right? Maybe our CMDB hasn't been modified in the last, let's say recently, right? Maybe it's been out of date for a while and we just haven't been able to update that CMDB so that everything is flowing to our OCI server so that we get the most granularity here. But we can see our tier 3 has been hammered, our tier 1 has been hammered, but we're seeing most of our workloads are sitting on tier 2.
And indeed, I'm very familiar with that CMDB. It's more of a manual process of having it updated. So what I'm seeing here is we really need to get that CMDB automated such that the percentage of NA or non-categorized workload is instead of 80-90%, less than 10%.
Yeah, definitely. The more granularity that we have inside OCI, the better this dashboard becomes. Now, this is just the first of the 5 dashboards that we're seeing today. This is look at the global. So what we want to take a look at next is being able to drill down into a specific cluster. Stage 2 then pulls us into looking at by cluster. We're sorting this by the busiest cluster so that you can easily tell which one you may want to take a look at first, right? So in this case would be the fifth fast name here. So this is looking at the cluster view, seeing what the performance workloads are being done on this particular cluster. So you can see the capacity utilization, the node utilization, and the disk utilization. So we're tying these metrics back from the first dashboard into the second one, looking at the our cluster level here. And then using these metrics, we are going to be comparing them against the volumes that are on this particular cluster. So we can start seeing the thresholds on each one, seeing what the volumes are, and seeing how correlated they are against each node, disk, or latency across the entire cluster here. So we can see that there are a strong correlation between the node and the volume IOPS. And we can see something very similar to disks. And
can I wonder about something here? So if we see them diverging and not being correlated, that could be a symptom of maybe a lift failover and indirect I/O, or some IOPS not contributed to the volumes. Could be the deduplication process kicking off at an inopportune time.
Right, so it could definitely showcase that if it's not tied to a specific volume, it could be an internal workload such as dedupe compression. And then what we want to focus down is down below here, looking at the bubble chart, we can see all our volumes distributed across the environment, looking at the volume IOPS versus latency here. And this is again grouped by tier and by application. So on your left here, you'll see the tiers. On the right, you'll see the application. So you can see here very closely that all the non-critical applications are sitting on tier 2 again. This confirms what we saw earlier. But we can also highlight these little bubbles here and see what those volumes are, so that we can easily go back to the UI and say, hey, this has an application on it. We want to re-annotate this. Maybe we need to go back to our CMDB, update that CMDB, and then manually populate it into OCI and then figure out what's the best way to automate this so that we have a clean look and feel for the entire environment, right?
It sounds like we need to put some SLAs on these applications such that we really understand what tier they should be receiving and what level of latency versus the IOPS. That way we can do much better financial management.
Exactly, because what we're seeing here, we're seeing everything is doing below 1 millisecond. This tells me, even though they're sitting on tier 2, it's almost doing like a tier 1 workload, right? But I can't really tell unless I analyze it a little bit further. And that's what we're going to see as we move on to the next couple of reports. So this is going to be the phase 3. This is looking at, just from a tier's perspective, what our current infrastructure looks like today without making any changes, right? And then comparing this against a certain budget that we have aligned. So over the last couple of months, or even the past year, we've been doing a budget of just 90,000. We want to stay below this 90,000 threshold in case we have to allocate more future workloads to something else outside of our application owners. Maybe we have to do some other ideas, or maybe we want to transition from just similar to CDOT, get that done, and then we'll allocate more budget later on. But as we see here, as the months go by, our tier 2 has been growing well. Our tier 1 and tier 3 has been steadily about the same, right? We see that we now, as a result, started to cross that threshold of our 9,000 budget here. And then you can see here, for the allocated capacity, they had been growing steadily. But our use capacity, which is the dark line here, this has been pretty much about the same. This tells me that this may not be an issue with our capacity. We may be bottlenecked from a performance standpoint. Maybe that's why applications are asking for tier 2, because they believe that they need to be sitting on tier 2 to get the right level of service. And then down here, we can see most of our used and allocated cost and capacity are tied to Tier 2, not so much for Tier 1, Tier 3. So most of our application owners are just using Tier 2. But what does that really mean? So what would
Kathy, can you elaborate on service levels versus tiers? It looks like there's two things going on over here.
So tiers are what we, as let's say service providers, are allocating to ourselves, right? So tiers would be synonymous with disk types. If a customer asks us, hey, I want the best level of service, that tells me that they want some sort of flash. If they don't really care, they want to be a little bit more budget constrained or budget conscious rather, then maybe they're looking for SATA. But SATA in most cases, especially from a performance standpoint, tends to be a little bit slower than everything else. And usually from a service level standpoint, that's usually what we call capacity of value.
So going back to our busiest array and our busiest volume on that array, what it was receiving was either high, update, or extreme, somewhere in that range.
Exactly,
yet it was
sitting
on Tier 2. So we have the opportunity to apply a service level to it and potentially put it in an appropriate service level. If it's an unimportant application, put a QoS policy on it so it doesn't do so many IOPS, or even move it to the Tier 1 storage. So obviously in our demo data center, we have a lot of opportunity to put service levels on applications and do retiering. And if we do the retiering optimally, we have a lot of opportunity for cost savings.
Yep. So from a service level standpoint, we are now starting to take into account SLAs and SLOs, right? When we're just doing tiers, we didn't really care whether or not we were accommodating for a certain person's latency. If they're seeing latency issues, we only took it in an incident standpoint, right? A case-by-case incident. But now with the service levels, we are going to be taking a look at proactively what those levels of service should be so that we make sure every single application who sits on a particular service level gets a guarantees SLA and SLO.
And Mike, I think you touched upon something important here as well. We have an opportunity to save some money, but I think also if we can identify the performance needs for these and we can associate it with an application, then we can be billing that infrastructure back to those appropriate cost centers, if you will, right? So there's an opportunity to make sure that that's allocated to the proper centers, and that we can actually budget accordingly. If the performance is needed, then it's needed, but we should really understand that better.
And that's where some really good financial management comes into play, is then we can give a showback report. Here's your applications. Here's the service levels that they are currently being charged for. Here's the service levels that they're demanding, and this is how much money you can save. So a very strong communication tool with our application owners when they're doing application rationalization.
Exactly.
So in this dashboard here, we are starting to take a look at service levels. So this is IOPS per terabyte. All the I/O that has been doing from those volume standpoint over the last 2 weeks, and looking at how much the demand was for those applications. This is looking at the used terabytes in this sense. In the case of volumes that have space guarantee, we are only looking at the used capacity of those volumes so that we are accurately trying to find the best level of service for those particular applications, right? So in this case here, we're seeing two different costs here. You'll notice that this is tying to the used versus the allocated of those applications. So this gives the service provider a option whether or not they want to charge on just the demand of the applications, or if you want to start accounting for the allocated capacity like we've done previously with the tiers, right? But by looking at the allocated, they are going below that particular budget that they had earlier, which was 90,000. But as you see here, all those service levels that were sitting on Tier 2 are being realigned to Tier 3, which is our capacity and value service levels. And then looking at it from a used standpoint, or what the demand actually is, we are seeing that the majority is still on Tier 2, but because some of it has been moved out to Tier 3. From a future standpoint, those future projects or applications that new application owners will come later on, let's say in the next 12 to 18 months, will be able to sit on Tier 2 if they had the need or demand for that particular service level.
So by annotating our applications in our CMDB and negotiating service levels with our application owners, then this whole process becomes much easier because then everything is all neatly labeled and you can see exactly where your value is going to be.
Exactly. So you'll see here that a good majority of it still sits on that Tier 2 here, but they are still associated with NA or non-critical applications. But this tells me here, because of the demand that's coming from these non-critical applications, that they may be critical. We just haven't had a chance to actually associate them with an application, or because our CMDB hasn't been updated for a while. And then we can see here that this is the area that we're going to focus. This is where we want to potentially tell our application owners that, hey, we're probably going to move you to Tier 3 if this is something you want to take a look at, because you are only demanding for Tier 3's level of service, our capacity and value here. And this may save you a lot more money because we're going to move you down to a lower tier.
And free up some of that performance for when new workloads come online, right?
Exactly. For the future projects that come in within the next 12 or 18 months. Now, Phase 5, we're going to be taking a look at the trends across all the applications within the environment to the service levels that we have defined now, right? This is the capacity, value, performance, high read, high update, and extreme, what we saw earlier. We can pick a certain application and tie it back to those service levels so that we can see the SLOs and SLAs from a latency standpoint, but also from the IOS per terabyte or IO density standpoint as well. So right now we're taking a look at messaging. Currently, because it's sitting on Tier 2, we're looking at the high reads. We can see here that as a result of just looking at the Tier 2 standpoint or high reads, we can see that we are experiencing some latency because there are some volumes that are crossing the SLO, the IO density standpoint here, right?
Kat, can you explain the difference between SLAs and SLOs and how we're setting them? I don't think everybody's been through the service design workshop.
Sure. So the SLO is the service level offering. This is what we are billing against, right? We don't. If you're asking to be on, let's say, a value standpoint, which is, let me just go back to the previous slide here, just so we're aligned. Oops. Trying to go back here. All right. So let's say you're asking for a service level capacity. Your SLO is going to be at 128, so that will be your QoS policy. You will never be able to go above that 128 IOS per terabyte. Now, we are still guaranteeing you the right latency, which is, I believe, it was at 80. And then we'll guarantee that you never go across that 80 milliseconds of latency. All right. Likewise, if you are within the extreme service level, the highest premium service level that we have today, we are going to be guaranteeing you, I believe it's 2 milliseconds of latency as your SLO. However, you will never cross anything, let's say, above that because we are guaranteeing it for you.
So
so SLA is what we're guaranteeing versus SLO is what you are expected to pay.
So the SLO is what we're building to internally, and the SLA is what we have sold to our application owners as this is what we're guaranteeing. So our alarms are set such that they ring when we're breaching our SLOs. So most of the incidents we have are just internal incidents, and they're not incidents in the eyes of our application owners.
Yep, exactly. So that we make sure that we always guarantee that level of service, correct.
Oh, excellent. Thanks for clearing that up.
All right, so let's go back to that chart here. So let's say we realigned our service levels with the application so that it gets the right offering here. So now we moved it up to high updates so that it doesn't cross the SLO. And then we can see that as we're starting to realign this the latency should be much better. Obviously, we see one volume here that is crossing that certain latency here, but maybe it's because it has been updated with the correct annotation or application.
So when the application is retiered, and at some of our customers, that's just a matter of pressing a button on one of our reports, the latency will readjust according to the higher tier that it's on, and the application owner will see that immediately. Are these the type of reports that not only we work with our application owners to set the right service level, but are they also the ones we email them out every week to show them that we are reaching those service levels?
So this is definitely the type of report that we want to set up to our application owners to make sure that we are guaranteeing that level of service, right? Even if we don't send it to the application owner themselves, but the people who are managing that, the storage admins who are managing these applications, to make sure that they are guaranteed a right level of service.
So by having that information, the number of times they open up tickets with us and saying, this is slow, probably will get reduced, and the conversation will probably change to, I'm at the capacity service level. Can you put me in the high read service level?
Exactly. That's definitely the discussion that we want, for sure. We definitely want those application owners to start talking about whether or not they're on the right level of service, and then asking for a high level of service if they require it, for sure.
Mike, we all know that, the conversation with application owners is always, I need the fastest thing you have. Well, you can show them what they actually demand with this type of report, and it does change the discussion from finger pointing and saying that we're not delivering to a different discussion of, are you willing to pay for that other level of service, that higher performance tier, right, or SLA? It's definitely a better side of an argument to be on.
So what we see from NetApp IT is a lot of their applications owner are always asking, hey, I need to be on flash. I can't have any latency. But then as they're starting to implement the service levels, they are starting to show back to those application owners that, hey, I'm not even demanding this kind of workload. Why am I sitting on flash? Maybe I should move on to a lower tier or level of service.
So it's starting to look like the service level discussion is the key to running your IT department like a service provider and doing some really strong financial management, just like the large service providers out there.
I wish my internet company provided me a report like this.
This is really fantastic work, Katya.
Oh, thank you. But this was definitely a teamwork, right? All of us worked on this to make this flow for not just from one dashboard, but through all 5 dashboards, right? Each dashboard itself can pretty much stand on its own, and that's what we've done historically. But what we're trying to showcase now is being able to provide that use case to the customer so that we talk to the right people, the right C-level executives, so that we can have a better discussion about how to run your business.
Very exciting. Do you have anything else to show us this afternoon?
I believe that's all it.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, guys, I want to thank you both. I know you both spent a lot of time and energy, and you brought excitement to some of the things that we prepared today. We plan on showing this in Insight Vegas, Berlin. So for our customers who may be joining us there, they'll see other demonstrations in this live in action. But again, thank you both very, very, very much for all the time and dedication you put toward delivering this for us today.
And that's it for me.
Thanks, Don. Thanks for the opportunity. This was a very good experience.